Welcome back, everybody, to talking about the Wheel of Fucking Time. And yes, it's the next day. I've done another 20% of the book, which means another 10 chapters. And yeah, there we are. Wheel of Time, chapters 11 until 20 of The Eye of the World. And once again, this will be as spoilery as I can make it for those chapters. I might hint at stuff that I have read before, but I'll try to avoid that. And I'll go into, things that I noticed while reading it, and things that I think may be problematic, and things that I think are actually done well, if there are any. We'll see. Another thing that I wanted to ask is I'm reading these relatively quickly at the moment, and I can put one up every day, and at least at the moment, like every weekday. But, I've no idea if people watching this are people reading along at the moment, or are people out, if you guys have read it already, or whatever. So would you prefer me to put that stuff up every day, or do one every other day and do something else in between? It's literally, I don't mind, I just need to know what to do. I think I'll do what I will do is to record all of those like in a block. I could probably just like spread them out a bit if that is something that you prefer, because I don't want to stop reading for today and then record another video to tomorrow or whatever. I want to read those as a block and then record them immediately after reading this. I stopped reading this bit like half an hour ago, 20 minutes ago. So that's sort of what I wanted to ask you. If you want me to spread them out a bit longer, or if you don't care because you binge watch this or whatever, let me know. I'd appreciate that. Anyway, let's get started, shall we? Well. Cheers. All right. So, we left yesterday. I left off yesterday after chapter 10, which is leave taking, which is when our intrepid heroes or annoying adolescents, pick whichever you prefer, are finally leaving Emmons Field, are leaving the Two Rivers country, or what you may call Wheel of Time Shire. That's sort of where we are right now. We got like a big speech of, what's her name, Moraine, talking about all the glorious history of the two Rivers country, and that other country before it that I can't remember the name of right now, but who fucking cares? And then they're off. They're doing the I'm hunted by a Nazgul on wings kind of routine all the way to the ferry. Now, if racing to a ferry to cross a river sounds familiar to you, that is probably because it is it is another element from, say, Lord of the Rings, and we'll talk about that again today. So I know it's a dead horse that has been beaten by everyone and their dog, but of course we need to talk about like elements from other literature that are used in this book, because it's not only Lord of the Rings, but it's a lot of Lord of the Rings here today. And I try to not just beat this one for being a Lord of the Rings knockoff, because it's not, but I feel it's still important to point those scenes out. So we have them racing along the river, like racing towards the river, doing a brutal night ride, which I guess is something we don't get that much of in Lord of the Rings itself. And we already get the flying thing. Oh, I said that yesterday already, the Drakkar, right? So we get the Drakkar, which is a flying Nazgul thing. And yeah. And then they're riding to the ferry in Tarn Ferry, and they cross. And there's something that I feel is important to look at here. One of them is the situation with Rand, and it's a foreshadowing, and I might be cheating a bit by mentioning it here, because I'm not sure if I actually noticed it the first time round. I'm not quite sure. Point is, we have that situation with Rand wishing that his horse Bella, his actual own the horse he owns, Bella will actually run fast and to keep up with the other horses because it's more of a farm pony, I guess. At least that's sort of like when I so when I imagine Bella, I imagine the horse that my mother owns that I've been riding over the years. It's more like a draft animal, best draft pony horse kind of thing, and you can ride those, but they're not exactly built for speed. They're built for power kind of thing. Anyway, so he wishes, and then Bella keeps up and is the freshest horse of the lot at the end of the day. And isn't that wonderful? And also, there's some weird feelings that Rand gets. So, is there more to it? Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see. I just feel it's important to point that out, that it is put in here, because we're also going to talk about techniques, narrative techniques, while going through all of this. And it's something that I want to look at a bit, at least today. So yeah, what happens then is they cross the river with highly suspicious, greedy motherfuckers of ferrymen. We get to see the ruthless side of Mistress Moraine. And then they go to Burlon. There's there's an encounter with basically the prancing pony, although it's obviously not the prancing pony, and we're going to talk about that in a second as well. They meet the good fascists, which is the White Cloaks. They leave. They encounter another army of Trollocs, which are totally not orcs, and a lot of murder rolls. So we get a lot more totally not Nazgul hangout. We get our obligatory Moria scene, and that's where we'll leave off today. That's sort of like after the Moria scene, we'll leave off today. At what might be called the breaking of the fellowship. What. So, what are the things that I really wanted to look at? One thing that I found is important, or find a bit disturbing, or at least disheartening here, is the crudity of it all. Robert Jordan, I hope this will change in later books. I have no idea. I hope it will change in later books. But right now, Robert Jordan's characterizations are as crude as it gets. Right? So you have the guy from Tarn Ferry, the ferryman. He can't be trusted. He's already he's super greedy. He is at the same time a coward, and his nose is twitching like a ferret's when he smells money. And dude, knock it up. Knock it off. It's a bit too crude. It's that the guy with the scar is going to be the evil spy. It's yeah. I guess it can be seen as, once again, a throwback to your pulp writing and whatnot, where oftentimes a character, because you don't get a lot of page count to develop characters, right? So what you do is you broadcast characters or morals or aspects of character through their appearance, right? You know what I mean? It's when all the evil guys are still wearing twirling mustaches, mustaches that they're twirling and stuff like that. That's sort of where I guess this comes from, but Robert Jordan has 600 pages that he can use to build characters. He doesn't have to do that anymore. Maybe it's something that he'll learn over time, because, as I said, he started out as a writer of Conan stories, and maybe he just has to find his way in a much larger page count. Because, that's if I'm trying to play devil's advocate here and why he does it. But he does it a lot, and it can be exasperating, as I guess what I'll say. Those characters, a lot of those feel like very brutal cliches, which is sort of where, the Padan Fane kind of thing fits in, although I think we'll have more problems with that dude, and I'll point it out again. When they're in Burlon, the city, they meet Padan Fane again. Remember the guy with the hooked nose? He's once again introduced as the guy with the nose, which I still find difficult. Now he shows cowardice, greed, and other aspects even more so, and it's still not a good look. Something, however, that I found, at least tolerable, is the way the naivete of our young friends, our main characters, our gang from Emmons Field is like when they come to the city, like town. I guess town is the best word for Berlin, and how they're already intimidated by that kind of thing. I felt that was done pretty well. In general, it's like I know those characters are fucking annoying, and I'm annoyed by all of those. Least by Nynaeve. I'm gonna say this. Nynaeve is definitely the best of the lot. Um, but yeah, they're fucking adolescents. Adolescents behave like idiots most of the time. So I can at least, I mean, so I can forgive that aspect. I think even with those characters, it's also painted rather in broad strokes. Like Matt is basically Pippin, Peregrine Took, just taller and a bit more over the top. He always has dumb ideas. He does them immediately, and so forth. While I guess Beren is sort of your Sam Gamgee mixed with Merry, if you want to keep the whole Hobbit kind of analogy. It's obviously not fully applicable, but those characters are also very broad. We'll need to talk about the whole Rand Egwene interaction. That's definitely something we need to look at some point. Just maybe not today. Also, I just had an idea that I'm not sure I should put it in here, but keep in mind the name Egwene. And he think also about the idea of dragons being reborn, and look at your Arthuriana at some point. Just saying. I smell a rat, and it may get its neck broken at some point, its spine broken. We will see. Anyway, it's not exactly where I wanted to go. All right, let's look at the Tolkien thing that we need to talk about today. And that is the Stag and Lion, because as I said, it's easy to bash this book for picking too many pieces from Lord of the Rings and using them and whatnot. But as I said before, a lot of authors at the time did that. At least pick parts like set pieces, structures, and whatnot from Lord of the Rings, because for a lot of people at the time that was sort of like if you want to write the blueprint for epic fantasy, and also the blueprint for epic fantasy for publishers. That's what they wanted, because they knew Lord of the Rings kind of sold. I mean, I have no real idea how well it sold in the early 80s. In my mind, it was always like it sold well around like the 60s. And then it started selling well again around the movies. And in between, I've always thought it was more of a lull in Lord of the Rings sales, but who knows? I may be wrong. People that know stuff like that can please correct me on it. However, my point is a different one. My point is that there are probably, because, the printing industry, like any form of media industry, is probably like a decade or 2 decades behind the times usually when it comes to anything. So maybe it's exactly, you have to write a different version of Lord of the Rings, or at least engage with Lord of the Rings in some form to actually have a good chance of getting published, I guess. We will see. However, there's different ways of doing that. There's different aspects of doing that. Picking, I don't know, a volcano where the bad guys hang out is, well, I mean, volcanoes are pretty fucking cool. It's not exactly this is like a 100% Lord of the Rings copy if there's like a volcano that is sort of like where the evil guys hang out. However, having an inn like the Stag and Lion is also not necessarily a direct Lord of the Rings kind of thing. However, it feels very much like Bree. Berlin feels a lot like Bree in some ways, at least with the Stag and Lion, particularly with the fucking innkeeper, Master Fitch. He is Barlim and Butterbur, even down to his fucking speech patterns. The way he always like talks about 10 things at the same time, is bustling around complaining how busy he is. He's fat. He's always calling his like like employees around. He's bossing them around like Butterbur is bossing around Knob and Hob. This one is like literally, it feels like a direct copy and an unnecessary one. You want an inn in a city? Sure, go ahead. But why? What? It, as I said, it feels like an unnecessary copy in this regard, and it kind of served the same purpose here as does Bree. Even down to the situation where one of them is going away and is meeting the the Nazgul. In this case, it's obviously Rand when he's doing the I'll get a drink of milk and he runs into it and then they all leave. But until then, there's just like too much Lord of the Ringery in this particular scene because it feels unnecessary. It's like you want to use something like that flight in the dark being followed by a flying evil thing. Sure, go ahead. I can live with that, but like, why does the bar have to be the prancing pony? Surely Mr. Jordan went into a pub at some point in his life and could kind of come up with a different bar. I don't know. Let's look at some more things that I feel are interesting to look at, though. Before we come to another one of those Lord of the Rings set pieces that have made it into a lot of fantasy books at the time. By which I mean, obviously, the Moria set piece, or here in this case, Shadow Waiting, chapter 18 and 19. But before that, let's look at a bit at Burlon, and because we see something going on here that we don't necessarily have, that is sort of, if not unique, or like a genuine contribution of Robert Jordan's to, that does not have direct antecedents in fantasy literature. That is the White Cloaks, the fascists. I'll just call them fascists because they are, and they're pricks. And the idea there is that fanaticism in general is bad. Fanaticism of the good variety can be as bad as that of the evil variety. Think of, the Inquisition, which, we at this point think of like really bad guys. I do have words and thoughts on the Inquisition at some point. We might want to do that. I don't know. The Inquisition, we might want to look at that at some point. Not today, though. But the idea of, like, well-armed dudes walking around claiming to be the good guys and behaving like arseholes is something we don't see in a lot of, your classic sword and sorcery stories, and we don't have that in a lot of like epic fantasy before that. There is, dare I say, a bit of nuance here. Well, not really. I mean, they still behave like classical bad guys, but at least they come at it from the other side. And that's, I don't need to tell you that I don't like those dudes, but that's we'll see where all of that will go in the future, because I'm pretty sure they will show up again. I mean, yeah, they will. So that's an interesting one. It raises weird world-building questions, however, which is like, how come the Aes Sedai can actually move anywhere if like everyone really hates them? It's like, how are they still a power in the land if if it's like that? Who knows? The other thing that I really wanted to talk about for a second is, once again, like crude characterization and stuff. And that is the brutal pragmatism of Mistress Moraine. Right? I remember when they cross with the fairy, and as I said, the fairy scene is a bit like, that ferryman is a bit over the top in general, I feel. But what we see there is at the end, because she's like afraid that they would like, the Master Hightower would sell them out or whatever, so she just wrecks his ferry. Yes, she pays for it. But still, it feels like, we see or get shown deliberately that dealing with the Aes Sedai is, like, they're not just the good guys, or at least they are willing to go to certain lengths where, like, their ends are concerned. It's one of those ends justifying means kind of situations. Now, once again, you can argue that yes, they get paid, so all's well. And we have the same thing when they leave Burlon, and then the Stag and Lion gets burnt down. And she's like, "Yeah, I'll just send him money through untraceable channels, so he'll be all right. No worries there." It's like, I don't know. That feels like a very, very dare I say capitalist look at it. Like, I don't like that aspect of it. But I mean, it is put out there as something to be argued about, and that's something I want to point out is maybe where we can see a contribution of Robert Jordan's to the genre of epic fantasy. We have characters actually starting to argue or think about morals. Now, are there like clear-cut conclusions or anything like that? Not really. Should there be? Maybe not. We don't know. But at least there is such a conflict, which is something that we have basically not at all in, say, Tolkien. We also have it. We also almost never have it in, our sword and sorcery 1930s, like pulp era stuff. We do have obviously a lot of moral quandaries in something like Elric, but yeah. It's been ages since I read that, so I will not elaborate too much on Elric today. But Michael Moorcock is, at his heart, a political author, has always been, and is deliberately engaging with the idea of the sword and sorcery hero or the epic fantasy hero, and really doesn't like those. And so there are like things going on there with Elric, and we'll talk about Elric when I get the new audiobooks at the beginning of February. I promise you we'll go back to Elric because I'm keen to reread those. It's been ages and I can't wait for Sailor on the Seas of Fate because it has ridiculous, crazy psychedelic shit going on. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Quick aside done, however. So what else? We have rather crude characterizations most of the time. A lot of those characters feel like really flat cliches and stand-ins and whatnot. But I hope that over time, realizing how much space he has to explore all of that stuff, our buddy Robert Jordan will actually stretch his writing muscles a bit and become more interesting. All right. Magic. Now, I will not go into the hard, soft magic system kind of stuff because so far we haven't seen a lot of magic. We have seen some of it, and it seems to be right now it feels very convenient when it comes to what is possible or not. Like one time Moraine is doing some sort of illusions, the next time she's just like actually blowing up not thousands, but maybe dozens or maybe hundreds of like orcs and shit. It feels kind of weird that she can do both, and sometimes can't do anything. There seems to be a sort of like your basic Tolkien style, Gandalf style, and energy kind of conservation of energy kind of magic system at work. It's like you can draw power, you do that, but at some point you get exhausted. That's sort of like the basic rule of it. There seems to be more to it. Who knows? We're still like very early on. This is 40% in the first book. We're not even so yeah, I'm not complaining about that. What I am complaining, however, of is the battle scene before they enter that waiting shadow city, whose name I have already, Shadar Logoth. Before we enter Shadar Logoth. That's sort of what I'm complaining about. So they're riding there, and then they're hunted by orcs and Trollocs and Murdrol, and I'm fine with that. Now suddenly there's hundreds of them. There's like five, six, let me think, eight. 3 grown-ups and 5 kids. That's 8, yeah. And first of all, there's like dozens, if not hundreds, of those fucking Trollocs. But what do they have as weapons? They have catch poles. Like, the fuck? Also, apparently it's very easy to fuck with them. And then we have those situations where Moraine just pulls off the magic and just burns them and puts up like large walls of fire and shit. And I'm gonna go back and do the Tolkien thing again. What I said yesterday about like how we have a slow build. We don't have a slow build here. Like there's like throughout the entirety of Fellowship of the Rings, Gandalf uses magic once, maybe twice. He lights a bit of fire sometimes, and then yeah, he stands, in the way of a Balrog, and he locks a door. That's it. And that's fine because, like, if you pull out all the stops so early on in your story, and you have like a battle with hundreds of like Trollocs and full-on firewalls and shit, by one Aes Sedai, it feels a bit like overpowered, I guess. And there's a tendency, and we'll go back into like what I understand is epic or not. But there seems to be a tendency that like raising the numbers makes something more epic. I dispute that. And for me, it just felt a bit, cheap in a way. And once again, I feel maybe the pacing issue here it's a pacing issue, or like, I would call it a pacing issue, is once again that Robert Jordan is not used to having that much room to slowly build a story. So he ramps up the tension, he ramps up the power level fairly quickly, and then has to like circle through stuff that he has already done, because there's only that much higher you can escalate shit. That's sort of like an issue that I have with that battle there. It's like, if we're already at this sort of battle, what's the next thing? You're gonna blow up like an entire full-on city instead of a village like the next battle? Probably. And then countries, and then the planet. We still have like 13 and a half books to go, man. Take it easy. So yeah, we do that, and then we have a Moria scene. Why do I call it a Moria scene? Now, obviously, there's more like Moriatic things out there. The whole like dragon, like dwarven mind thing in Sword of Shannara comes to mind. But here's the pattern: is like there seems to be two ways about something, and we have two leaders, and one of them wants to do the one way, and the other one wants to do the other way. In this case, we're switching it. Our Gandalf character, which is, I guess, Moraine, because she's the magic user, and our ranger dude. In this case, it's Lan. It's the other way around, though. Lan is basically Aragorn. But compared to Lord of the Rings, where Aragorn wants to avoid Moria by any cost. This case round, he wants to actually go there, and Moraine wants not to do that, because Moraine really wants to do her way, which is like using more magic to do something. But because of like stuff that happens, we have to go into the dread place, which is the underworld, or some part of underworld, and there will be dire consequences to that, because you can't do that kind of shit without consequences. Someone has to pay. So we go there, and we enter Shadar Logoth, and stupid people do stupid things. In this case, the boys are back in town, and they walk around, and they meet a cursed dude, name of Mordeth. Mordred? Whatever, that guy. Who's totally not more like they meet him, but they kind of maybe avoid him because they don't take any treasure. I hope, Matthew. Coffin. Anyway, so it seems they kind of get away from it. Then we get like our flashback where Moraine finally tells them the story of like how all that stuff happens, and this is where we see some originality. Because what we see here, the lost city trope, not so much the dwarven mind with like having dire consequences going underground, but the lost city trope is very much a sword and sorcery trope. It's very much something that you see in your Robert E. Howard Conan story. Conan runs into lost cities all the fucking time. Characters in like Clark Ashton Smith stories run into lost cities all the time. So the lost crumbling city with an ancient evil still lurking in there is very much that kind of trope of the adventure story. And I feel this one feels a bit more like a Clark Ashton Smith story than a Robert E. Howard story because of the fog and tentacles kind of thing. I like that. I sincerely like that idea. That is creepy, and it works really well. Having 100 Trollocs chase them through that city feels a bit I don't know, but we can call it like a combination. You basically take Moria and turn it into Zuthal of the Dusk of the eponymous Conan story. I think it's called Zuthal of the Dusk. Yeah, that one, or any other of those lost cities. And that's a really cool idea. I like that. Once again, I feel the action scenes are a bit like feel unrealistic, but then again, few people were writing realistic fight scenes in that day and age. So I'm not complaining too much about that. So yeah, and then we split the party, which is what we usually do. We have apparently new groups. One of them being the boys like Rand and Matt and Tom, who end up on a boat. Who I really sincerely hope the pirate accent is only because of Michael Kramer and not because of Robert Jordan, because otherwise, river pirates? You sure? I don't know. And the other bit is obviously Beren and Egwene falling with their horses into the fucking river, and at least Beren surviving. Yeah, right. I don't know how many of you have ridden horses, but riding in the dark, galloping in the dark is not something that most horses would do. It's pretty fucking dangerous. And then just riding straight into a river that is apparently deep enough that like you fall in and cannot swim right at the beginning. It's like, that shit's dangerous. Normally you would not survive that. Anyway, so that's another group, and then we have Nynaeve and whatever happened to our awesome protector duo of Lan and Moraine. That stuff we will find out tomorrow when we have like split narratives. However, the one thing that I guess we need to talk about sooner or later is prophecies and dreams. Now, we know that all of those three boys have had weird dreams in which they meet the guy who is Baalzamon and possibly also Shaitan and other dudes. I don't know, the evil guy. And now we also have, so there is something special about each of them. Each of them is maybe born outside the, what's it called, Two Rivers, something like that. We'll see where all of that is going, but there is that like something lost, kind of thing. Like, I guess we'll talk about those special properties in the next video, because I feel like I'm running out of steam here. But that's like something that we need to talk about, like having dreams, having prophecies, because they meet Nim or Min. I'm not quite sure right now. Is it, yeah, that girl who has visions and sees all this stuff around all of them and tells them they're all connected and there's crazy shit going on. And now suddenly Matt can speak languages that he didn't know before and stuff like that. We'll see where all of that is going. All right. Mordeth, being this kind of cursed vampire figure that can swell up and turn into smoke, also felt very, very adventure story, very pulp story to me. I did, appreciate that in all its like cheesy special effectsiness. Yeah, there we are for tonight, I guess. We're moving up. The action level is increasing more and more, and now we know that at least all our three boys have mysterious pasts, and we'll see those hopefully come to life relatively soon. We've seen Matt having like some connection with the old king of like the Emmonsfielder guys. I have already forgotten their name again. We'll see what we have in store for Beren and Rand. Yeah, the party is split, and now we get different narratives. So hopefully we'll get more like actual viewpoint characters, because so far we've only had Rand, and everything's like through Rand's eyes. And yeah, that's it for today, I guess. I am not hating it as much as I thought I would. I am, however, still not. There's a lot to be desired to make this a really good book. The crudeness of the characters, the like far too quick raising of the stakes when it comes to stuff are deplorable in my like personal view and taste at this point. Um, the more or less direct copy of the prancing pony into the stag and lion was absolutely unnecessary. However, on the good side, we have a really cool scene in Shadar Logoth where we basically take the Moria set piece from Lord of the Rings and turn it into a haunted city from more of a sword and sorcery story kind of thing, which is cool. So yeah, I appreciate that. Let's see what the next, I guess, 20% of the book have in store tomorrow. So yeah, have a good day, and I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.